reimbursement form like that if you've got things from other places. And guys, we do need a receipt. I get really creative when I go to a basketball game at Chapel Hill Academy. Well, I wouldn't have to pay for that. But there are times where I go and like all they give me is that one little ticket stub that they rip off. And I say, I need to keep this for a receipt. And could you put the date on the back and your initials and the cost? And she's like, my name's Donna. I'm like, yes, Donna. And you have power. Write your name and sign because it can't be your own from somebody else. I've had people do the back of like choir concert programs, things like that, but we've got to have a physical receipt from you. The credit card, screenshot of your online American Express app, that's harder. They don't like that as much in accounting. It needs to be something specific. Okay, I'll take one more question. Okay, we don't want you to lose money being in the junior high ministry, and we have money budgeted for it, so let us help you with that. Okay, Luker, come on up. Would you please go throw things away so that your tables are clear? There are wet naps over there by the barbecue sauce. I will not say the other names some people use about them because those are sinful. And you should open your binder to a blank. And Chad, we are able to record this. Yes. Awesome. Thank you. So just like we say with the junior hires, the goal is that you do not stand up and move between now and the end of our time at 1:30. So get whatever it is that you need now, grab another beverage if you need to, but open up in your binders to a blank page. Caleb and I highly value you hearing other voices, not just ours. And I'm excited for you to hear the voice of my friend Luke today. If people ask me to describe our program in junior high ministry at Wooddale, I often say that we love programming and relationship. We love programming because we love to foster time where kids and leaders have together. But man, we are relational in our ministry. And Luke is going to share with us and broaden our scope of relational ministry this morning, this afternoon. So I'm going to pray. Then he's got the mic and he's going to have us walking by 1:30. All right. So, Lord, thank you for the gift of this day. Thank you for this team, Lord, that you have assembled. You have called each of us to the Wooddale Junior High Ministry for such a time as this. And I'm just, Lord, I thank you all the time for this team, and I'm just so grateful. So, Lord, whether or not we've been doing this for 40 years or this is our first time around, may we be sponges today. May we have open minds and hearts and know that the sanctification process is very real. And thank you for your servant, Luke, and bringing it to us today. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you, Heather. Appreciate it. Man, you would think it would be really easy to just hang out with students, right? It sounds simple. We spent the last 15 minutes talking about magic boxes and receipt screenshots, and you've probably done the back and forth trying to schedule something. Maybe you've had the horrifying, awkward sitting at a coffee shop with nothing left to talk about. There are a lot of steps involved in what seems like a simple thing, which is just hang out with kids. Just hang out with kids and hope that they can connect to Jesus that way. So the question is, why do we do it? Why do we spend all of the effort and the time and the policies and the procedures and the handbooks and all of that in order to have one-on-one time with kids? I want you to picture a canyon. On one side of the canyon is a teenager full of questions and doubts and struggles. On the other side of that canyon is what we hope they'll achieve, a lasting faith, a deeper faith, one that they'll carry on into adulthood. Between them is this massive gap. Here's the truth that every study, every statistic, every real world experience will tell you is that the single strongest bridge that you can build between those two parts of the canyon is not great sermons, though I know you get great sermons here. It's not flashy or fun events, though you do those too. It's not even the best youth group programming. It's you. You are the single most effective way for a kid to bridge from their struggles, their fears, their doubts to a lasting faith in their adulthood. You do that through one-on-one, face-to-face, real discipleship with caring with care and investment in those students. It's the most powerful factor in helping a kid stay connected to their faith long term. Now, here's the tension. It's a high reward. You do it well, and really incredible things are going to happen. But the greatest opportunity is also the greatest risk in student ministry. Because if you Google youth pastor right now, what you're going to find are a whole lot of news stories that you'd rather not. You're going to find a bunch of stories of leaders who crossed lines or ministries that didn't put guardrails in place or young people who were left hurt and confused and sometimes completely disillusioned by the church. This isn't just about having influence, it's about stewarding that influence well. So today we're going to talk about how can we do this right. We're going to talk about how we build life-changing relationships without crossing lines. How do we create trust without unhealthy attachment? How do we maximize our one-on-one time with students without losing sight of our true mission? And how do we get to the end of the day where they don't just need you, they need Jesus, and they're able to more closely connect with him because of the time that you've spent together? Let's start with this. You're gonna turn, you're gonna find someone at your table, and I want you to answer what I hope is a simple question. Why did you become a youth leader? Why are you in this room right now? Why did you say yes when someone came and recruited you? Turn to someone next to you and answer that question. Why did you become a youth leader? Go ahead. I'm gonna give you another 30 seconds. All right. I'm gonna give you part two of your question with the same person. I want you to answer this question. What is the scariest part to you of spending time with students? What scares you the most when it comes to spending time with students? Go ahead and share. 30 more seconds. All right. Tell me your deepest, darkest fears. Okay, maybe not your deepest and darkest, but tell me what scares you about spending time with students. What are some things that came up? Scared that I won't make a difference. Anyone relate? Feel that? For sure. What else? Miss an opportunity to say the right thing. Yeah, driving home and you go, oh, I should have. What else? Yeah, yeah. God holds those who teach, especially the next generation, to a higher standard. One of the most terrifying verses in the Bible for those of us in this room. And to not steward that well or not do that well feels like the stakes are pretty high. Yeah. What else? Sure. Yes, not knowing the lingo, feeling like an outsider. Everyone giggles when you say something and you have no idea why. Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah. So being younger and not sure you have the wisdom or how to be a role model, isn't that interesting? We have both sides of the coin. I'm too old and they're not going to want to connect with me. I'm too young and I don't have anything of value to bring. Turns out we can be afraid no matter where we are in life of doing this thing. As I listened to some of the other comments, other fears, there was nothing I've never heard before. It turns out we all kind of share the same categories of fears, and they are grouped around a handful of things. A lot of those can be like knowledge. I'm just afraid I don't know what to say, don't know how to guide them, don't know how to respond. Some of them might be liability. Just how do I do this well? We're in a risky situation with a student, or they're going through something really heavy, and I want to be sure that I steer them or coach them in a good direction. Effectiveness is a big one. It's a thing that can keep us up at night. Am I making a difference? Did I say the right thing? Could I have done it any better? And one I didn't hear, but I'll hear a lot of time, like my own soul, my own faith. Is my faith up to this? Is my walk with Jesus close enough that I should really be telling students how to do that? Right? It can be scary. But the good news is we're going to cover all that. We're going to talk, no fears. By the time you leave here, guaranteed all your fears are gone. You will be the most confident group of youth leaders ever. Probably not true, but we will go. So here's how I put this presentation together. It's kind of like a buffet, okay? The idea is I've prepared a lot of dishes. There's a whole lot there. It's sort of help yourself. We're going to go through. Some of these are going to feel like old things. I'm sure they're things that Heather's already told you, and I'm just reiterating. My hope, though, is that also through there will be some things that are new, something novel, that when you walk out of here, you're leaving with at least one tip, one idea, one insight that you didn't have before. So we're going to rattle through. It's kind of like a listicle, like you go on the BuzzFeed or whatever, and here's top 10 things you need to know about hanging out with students. In your notebook, I'm going to encourage you to write down the ones where you're like, oh, that's interesting, or that kind of stood out to me. Don't have to record them all, but we're going to go kind of rapid fire to get through as much as we can. And unlike most buffets where you go straight to the fried food, we're going to start with health food today. Okay, we're going to talk about how do we make it a healthy interaction when we're spending one-on-one time with students. We want it to be effective, of course, but it's really important for it to be healthy. Now, I know that as leaders, you go through abuse prevention training. You have some important policies in place to help reduce those types of risks. We're not going to spend a lot of time in there. Those are important. You're getting that training. But healthy one-on-one ministry is not just about preventing harm. There are some ways to do it in a healthy way that's healthy for the student and that's healthy for you. It's about creating relationships that are safe and strong, and that helps students grow without becoming unhealthy or dependent on you. It allows you to know the boundaries so you can tell when you're coming up against them. And because healthy leadership isn't just about avoiding the bad, it's about something building, but building something better. We're going to start with that. We're going to start with how do we build something better? How do we build a healthy foundation for these relationships? So here's number one. You can be their friend. They can't be yours. You can be their friend. They can't be yours. Your role in this ministry is basically that of a shepherd. Shepherds sheep are grateful for shepherds. Sheep appreciate that the shepherd is there. They love their shepherd. They'll come to the shepherd and ask the shepherd for guidance. But if that shepherd said, "These sheep are my best friends," we'd look at him a little weird. If they got down on all fours and started eating all around, we'd go, "That guy's crazy. That is an unhealthy shepherd." You do not need to be like the sheep in order to be a good shepherd. One of the ways that you can do this is that your time spent together is focused on the student. They are the main attraction. It's not about you. They're not your friend. They don't care what your workday was like. It's about them. It's about what they're going through. It's also about their journey, not about your journey. Now, there's times for appropriate sharing. There's times where you can bring in something that's happening in your life, but it shouldn't be about you. It should always be in service of what is good for them. And so the question is, how will your time together move that student closer to Jesus or further along in their spiritual journey or past some obstacle that they're going through? It's all about them. It's not about you. Second to that, similar to it, is they can need you. You can't need them. They can need you. You can't need them. This is a one-way relationship. We're taught those are unhealthy, and in your personal life that may be true. Here, it's the whole deal. It's what we're here to do. It is a one-way relationship. Again, it's them focus. It's not about what you might get out of it. Let me ask this. What are some signs that a leader might be relying too much on a student? That a leader might be coming to a place where they need the student or they need the ministry. I'm going to let you pick a different person at your table, have that conversation. What are some signs that a leader might be relying too much on a student for approval or validation? Go ahead.
Awesome.
15 seconds. All right, I'm curious what you came up with. What are some signs that you maybe have an unhealthy need for the students or the student ministry? How can you tell if this is getting backwards a little bit? Where are some things you came up with? Yeah. Ah, I bet we're going to find a lot of parallels with parenting. Let the student get away with something because it'll make you get to be the cool mom, cool dad. What else? Sure. Talking about you a whole lot. Probably looking for approval. Ooh, yeah. Spend a lot of time with them. Don't encourage them to integrate.
You are personally hurt when they're mad at you. So if you have to correct them and they get mad at you,
Yeah. Personally hurt. That was over texting, sure. If your communication with them seems way out of proportion to everyone else, for sure, absolutely. Similarly, you text them, they don't respond, and you feel like, hey, why aren't you responding to me? You're becoming kind of the needy something something. You go looking for compliments. You try and do things that you know will garner their favor. That will get them to. They think that's cool. Flip side of that is if they insult you, it hurts. I still remember one of those moments where I had to kind of check myself. There was a eighth grade boy who told me I was looking a little chubby, which is a hurtful thing to say for sure. And we can't all have the metabolism of an overcaffeinated hummingbird, and so it happened twice. Once at the time, I was really hurt. I was upset. I was like mad at this kid. I'm like, why is this bug? He's a middle schooler. He's going to say middle school things. It really bugged me. The other one, and this is petty, and I'm going to confess to you now, is that was about 18 years ago, and I saw him on Instagram. He has a bit of a dad bod now, and I felt justified. And then I realized I had not fully dealt with that there was still something back in there where I was like needing this kid to approve of my physical appearance in order to feel good about myself. There's a simple Bible verse that really lays out what we're supposed to do. He must become greater, I must become less. This is your whole role as youth leaders. One of my mentors used to say, your job is to go, look over here, look over here. And when a kid turns to look, you duck so they see Jesus standing behind you. I love that. I love that idea. We're there to get their attention, but when they look our direction, we should get out of the way and let them see Jesus instead. Because the students need Jesus more than they need you. They're going to need Jesus the rest of their life. They're going to need Jesus in every possible way. And when you get kudos, it's a chance to turn over and glorify God, to turn that over and say, I'm so glad I can be helpful, or I'm so glad that what I said resonated. I really think it's just because I'm trying to live how Jesus says to live. And highlight in your own life what Jesus is producing that they're responding to. Here's the next one. Confess, but don't confide. Confess, but don't confide. We do not need you to be a perfect youth leader because we need youth leaders. And if you had to be perfect, we wouldn't have any. We're not asking you to not have any issues, and we're not asking you to pretend you don't have any issues. It is healthy and it is good for students to recognize that adults also struggle with their faith, they struggle with temptation, they struggle with sin. They need to know that this is a lifetime work of sanctification, and not that you reach some age where suddenly it becomes easy to follow Jesus. That's not the deal, and we give them a false expectation if we set up that idea in their head. But we also can't confide in them. We can't tell them things that we wouldn't want getting out, that we're looking for that outlet for. We can't have them we can't ask them to hold something we're having trouble holding ourselves. We should only allow them to enter into or connect with or know about things in our life that we have a full grasp on. And so when you're thinking about, should I share this story? Should I tell this thing? You need to do a little bit of self-reflection on how much have I dealt with this thing? And is there something else I should talk about instead? So in general, you won't tell a student something you wouldn't want them to go and tell someone else because they're junior hires. They're gonna. And so if you're saying, oh, I want to tell you this, but I hope you don't tell everyone, that's a good little indicator. That's a dashboard light blinking saying, oh, maybe I shouldn't do this. All right, you're going to get a new partner. You're going to go through two scenarios. We're going to start with one of you is going to do scenario one, then we'll switch in a minute. But here is the scenario. One of you is going to be the student, one of you is going to be the leader. You can decide, and then you'll switch for the next scenario. And you're out with a student, you're hanging out, you're talking about their family, your family's really rough, and they say, my family seems so messed up. Has your family ever had problems? I'm going to guess yes, because I think your family's also full of humans like mine. So probably some problems. How do you healthily respond? You can maybe talk about a time where your family life or something, home life, you can interject what you like, is difficult or challenging or hard or messy. But how do you do that in a way that is healthy? Okay, go ahead and role play a little bit. All right, I'm going to interrupt you and give you scenario two. You're going to swap roles. So in this scenario, you're switching roles, remember. The student is asking you if you've ever struggled with a sin or addiction. If you're the student, you can pick something specific if you want. But you have a student who's like, oh man, have you ever looked at porn? Have you ever struggled with alcohol? Have you ever had these issues? What would you say? How would you respond if a student asked you about a specific sin or addiction? And for the sake of the scenario, let's say the answer is yes. Whatever they're asking about, the answer is yes. That has been a struggle for you. How are you going to respond? So, students, pick a specific sin, addiction, something that you want to ask about. And leaders, the answer is yes. How are you going to say yes? Go ahead. 30 seconds. All right. For either scenario 1 or scenario 2, how did that feel? How many of you it felt pretty easy, was able to navigate it? It was okay? How many of you felt kind of awkward, stumbling a little bit, not sure? Yeah, it's tricky, right? That's okay. Again, we're not asking you to be perfect. I did overhear one saying when talking about family problems, yeah, one of the things with my family is that we're not really good at sharing what's really going on, which is actually a super solid thing because then when they're like, well, like what? You're like, well, I'm not good at sharing. I just told you that. I'm still working. I'm a work in progress here, so this is good. These are helpful if you know a student is likely to ask about something. Usually, you're going to get caught off guard with these ones. Usually, it comes up on that bus ride, that coffee date, that whatever. And you're like, oh, we're going here right now. But if you know a student is struggling through something, it is good to think, how would I answer if they asked me about it? Because they're probably asking a little bit to see if you can empathize with them. Are you a safe person for me to talk about this? They might be asking to see where the boundary is. Can I get away with this and still be a good Christian like my youth leader? And so we don't know their motivations why they're asking, but it's important for us to think through why we would ask. All right, we're going to go a little bit rapid fire here, real quick. Again, ways to continue to have healthy one on one interactions with students. Make plans with the parents. Invite the student, plan with the parent. For a couple reasons. For one, parents are usually the chauffeur, the calendar holder. They're going to need to be involved with all of this. Planning with parents is great. Also, building that relationship with parents is incredibly valuable. I would often, at the beginning of our school year, we'd have our big parent meeting, and I'd speak to the biggest fear that I knew most of them had. And I said, I will make a deal with all of you. I will commit to believing only about half of what the students tell me is going on at home if you commit to only believing about half of what they tell you about what happened at camp. And everyone seemed to agree that was a good deal. But parents are afraid of what their kids are going to say about them. They're a little bit, a lot of them can be grateful that you're spending time with a kid, but a little nervous that they're going to spill the beans on what's going on at home. And so building that relationship with parents, seeing them as an integral part of healthy one-on-one ministry is an important part. There are 3 things I'm going to encourage you to do. There's lots of ways that you can do this. There's 3 things I found that are really great for gaining points and connecting with parents. The first is the planning. Always involve them. A parent shouldn't be surprised that you hung out with their kid. They should be delighted. You don't want to surprise them. So make the plan with them, communicate with them, group text with them if you need to, just so that everyone's on the same page. Positivity. Say nice things about their kids. Who doesn't want to hear nice things about their kid? You know how wonderful you feel if you have children when someone says, oh, they did such a good job at this, or I'm so impressed with it. Say nice things. Say nice things about their kid in front of their kid. Allow the student to see that you are someone who publicly praises them, who goes back to mom and dad and says, this is some impressive stuff I'm seeing in this young person here. Publicly praise them, be positive about them, and then send them postcards. This is such a hack, such a cheat sheet type of a thing. It's flawless because who picks up the mail? Mom and dad. And so you just happen to write a note that's just on the back of a card, and mom and dad are 100% going to read it. And so when you send a postcard to a kid, know that mom and dad are going to read it, write it with that intention. It's cool to get stuff in the mail. No one gets anything in the mail anymore. And then it's a chance for you to communicate to the student, but also to the parents. These are 3 really easy ways. There's 100 more. 3 really easy ways to earn points with parents who are wondering what your intention is with their kid or what the conversations you're having are with their student. And if you're able to let them see into that without validating the trust of that student, it's a great thing. It goes along with subsidized parenting. What this means is you are not parents. You are helping parents. You're helping subsidize their parenting. You're a volunteer. You are not an authority figure in these students' lives. You can't replace their parents, especially if someone comes from a family where there's maybe absent parents, or perhaps you disagree with the parenting style. It can become easy and tempting to start sliding into that parental role. That's dangerous. That can cause problems pretty fast because you don't have that voice, you don't have that vote, you don't have that right to step into that parental role. And so think of yourself more as someone who's trying to subsidize the parenting. You're trying to lighten the load of parenting by agreeing with some of what their parents are saying. I love how often a student will come to me and share something, and I will share my advice back, and they'll go, "That's what my mom said." Like, maybe she's right. You are not a firefighter. You cannot always run into every emergency that a student is going through. You will get burned. Something I actually learned from Heather when I was first starting out in my first youth pastor job that served me so well was the value of an intentional delay. When a student or a family reaches out and it sounds like all hell is breaking loose and things are, oh, we need your help and we don't know what to do and all that, it is amazing what one night's sleep can do for some of those issues. Now, you need to have an awareness. There might be times where it's a legitimate emergency, but you can't always be on call, because if you're always on call, soon you'll also always be on edge. You need to be able to disengage and recognize that you are not the emergency response team for these students. You're a coach, you're a companion, you're someone who's shepherding them along. You are not the one who has to run into every fire that they're going through. It's amazing how many situations will sort themselves out if you take a little bit of time. And this is an act of faith for you, because here's the thing: you are not the only person that God has on his team. You're not the only one he's hired for this work. And so if you don't do it, he doesn't go, well, Mark was my only chance. That was my whole plan. I guess that kid's out of luck now. He has a deep bench. This room is full of it. He has a deep bench that he can pull from, and he will. And so you can trust that the Holy Spirit will work as it needs to work. And maybe listen to that voice when a kid reaches out and it sounds like things are just blowing up in a huge way, to say, I'm gonna take a beat. I'll maybe respond tomorrow morning. Can't keep secrets. I'm sure you're aware of this, but it bears repeating. It's very common for a student to come and say, you have to promise not to tell anyone. I'll tell you this, but you can't tell anyone. You can't make that promise. You shouldn't make that promise. It's dangerous to make that promise when you don't know what's about to come. Here's what you can promise them. You can promise that you won't surprise them. You can say, hey, I want to tell you something. They'll come to you, I want to tell you something, and you have to promise not to tell anyone. And you can say, I can't make that promise because there's some things I'm required to tell. But what I can promise is that I will let you know if I'm going to tell someone. If we have to tell someone, in fact, what I do is I give them 3 options when we come across something where it has to be shared, probably with mom and dad usually. I say, you can tell them, I can tell them, or we can tell them. You can tell them, I'm going to follow up. I'm going to call mom and dad tomorrow and make sure you have the conversation and be a support for them however I can. I can tell them, I'll let you know when I'm going to tell them so that you can be prepared, because they're going to come talk to you afterwards. Or we can tell them together. We can set up a time where you and I will be in the room together, and either you or I can speak, but we'll all be together so you get to hear the whole thing. This gives them choice. This gives some agency when they're feeling trapped, when they don't want you to tell. This at least gives some control over how something comes out. It can be really, really helpful. All right, we're going to practice that really quick with someone just sitting next to you, because it's going to be a fast one. You're going to swap. I want you to have your phrasing ready to go for this. It should just be a reflexive action. When a student comes to you and says, I need to tell you something, but you have to promise not to tell, you should just have, it should immediately trigger an auto response in your brain. And it says this. So you're going to practice that auto response now. So one's the leader, one's the student. Ask the question, give your response, and then swap. And if you feel necessary, give feedback. Go ahead. All right. Along with this, I can tell them, you can tell them, we can tell them, is you need to know when it's something you need to tell. You need to know when it's something you need to report. The great news for all of you as youth leaders is the answer is if I'm not sure, that means it's something you should tell. If you're like, I don't know whether or not this is something I need to keep to myself, that is when you reach out to Heather. That's when you reach out to the pastoral team. That's why they're here. The beautiful thing about that, one of the things I found to be really, really helpful is then Heather or Caleb or others in the staff, they can take the lead on what needs to happen next. And you get to just be the person walking with the student through, which is an incredibly important role, but hard to do that and be the person who has to give the hard truth. Hey, we need to go have this conversation. And so offload that. That's why they're here. They want you to continue to be able to support that student and take off the burden of what do I do and just walk with that student through it. Never alone. This is, again, an obvious one. I know it's part of your policies. You should never be alone with a student, especially of the opposite gender. I would say you should never be alone physically or digitally. It is very easy to have a digitally private interactions with students. And you'll see news stories about folks who they had inappropriate digital only communication, and that was very problematic. And so you have your policies about how do you text with students and how does that interaction happen. I know there's like 100 different ways now, and the apps and the messaging, all of that. So a few things that I recommend or suggest with that. One is to not use any apps that have disappearing messages. You should be able to retain a permanent record of the entire conversation. And so there are some that will let you delete or recall or that. I would stay away from those just because it's better if you have the whole conversation. Screenshots are your friend. Screenshot everything, screenshot all the things. If you're concerned about something, you text it to your leaders, to your pastors, and say, hey, just so you know, this is what's going on. And to rope in other people, include other people in the thread whenever it makes sense. I love texting with parents. I love texting with other youth leaders, just so there's multiple people on there. So if you're like 2 life group leaders and you can have a group text with a student who wants to talk about something, that's incredible. Now you've got some accountability, you have extra record. Just don't be somewhere where it's your word against their word on what was said digitally. That's not going to end well at all. So never alone, physically or digitally. Yes, because Google is collecting all of your data and they will have it when you need to defend yourself. All right. Here's the last part of how to do healthy one-on-one. We're going to get into maximizing in our last 10 minutes here, but here's how you do the last important part of how to do healthy one-on-one, and that's know when to quit. I know that Heather would love for you to be a youth leader for years and years and decades and generations, and I hope you will too, because we've all seen what happens when you're able to do that. I was talking with Kathy, who became a leader when her child was in the ministry and then just stuck around for a couple decades. Yep, that is ideal. We want that kind of a story. But if you stick around when you shouldn't, if you something in your life is a cause to quit, to step back, to at the very least take a break for a season, and you don't do that, that's dangerous and that's difficult. This is not easy work. Pouring into students is depleting. It is time consuming, it's emotional, it's spiritual. And if you're trying to do that when you're already running on empty, it is likely to put not just yourself at risk, but the students as well in the ministry. And so knowing when you need to take a break, when you need to step back is important because ultimately what's best for you is what's going to be best for the ministry. And so, yes, you might feel like you're leaving Heather and team shorthanded, or man, I'm going to really let these kids down. But if you don't pause when all the warning signs are there, all the red flags are waving, it is likely to get worse, not better. And so, knowing when to quit is important. So, here are some times where you might need to consider quitting, stopping. And so, I want you to consider. I want you to do a personal inventory. I'm not looking to try and reduce the number of leaders Heather has through this training, but I am looking to give you, if you go through and you're like, ooh, check, 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 we need to listen to that because it's dangerous if we don't. So the first is if you're experiencing burnout. Burnout doesn't hit all at once, it kind of creeps in over time. And if you ignore it, you don't just become less effective, but you start to become maybe more dangerous as a leader. Signs of this could be that you dread showing up. It's taking all you can to muster the energy. This is different than having to get up for after the midnight game at camp or whatever. This is the just something deep. There's an existential dread when it's time to go serve in the ministry. You feel spiritually dry if you're constantly pouring out, but nothing is filling you back up. You can't go back to the well, and you're just running on empty. That might mean that your personal relationship with Jesus is taking a backseat to your students' relationship with Jesus. Most youth leaders I know do a better job of caring for their students' spiritual well being than caring for their own spiritual well being. So that's something to pay attention to. If you're completely emotionally exhausted, you just don't have the bandwidth anymore to emotionally experience what's going on in the ministry. If your patience is really thin, these are all signs that you could be experiencing burnout. The more strong they are, the further you are probably in burnout. Turns out I had been burned out for about 3 years when I first noticed it. And then when I did the work to go back and look, it was like, oh, all the warning signs that I dutifully ignored because, hey, we're growing the kingdom. And that was bad for me and for those around me. When your boundaries are slipping, this is another sign it might be time to quit. If you find yourself overinvesting in a specific student, you think about them more than the others, you go out of your way to spend time with them, and their validation matters to you, that means these boundaries are starting to slip. If you get defensive, if someone questions your interactions with a student, if someone asks, why are you always hanging out with so and so? And your gut reaction is defensiveness instead of, oh, that's a good question. Let me think about that. That's a red flag. If you're stretching rules or justifying things that once seemed like clear boundaries and saying, well, we met alone, but it just kind of it worked best that time. Or we're texting in ways that I wouldn't want other people to see, but I'm just building trust with them. If you're rationalizing a level of emotional closeness that feels different from your other student relationships, that is a sign that boundaries are slipping. If you enjoy the emotional connection a little too much, if you like being needed, we all want to feel like a superhero. But if you're relying on student relationships for your own validation or emotional needs, that's a sign that it's time to step away. And if you can't imagine walking away, might actually be a sign because you've tied your identity up so much in your role as a youth leader that the idea of not having it leaves you without knowing who you are. That's a sign that you have an unhealthy attachment to the ministry. Now, I hope you never walk away. I hope you don't come to that place. But feeling like, oh, I can never walk away does not necessarily mean that all things are good. And then sometimes it's just a change of season. Maybe you're phoning it in. You show up, but your heart's not really in it. Students will be able to notice that. You feel God calling you elsewhere, but you stay because you feel obligated to. That's not going to go well for anyone. Perhaps you've had major life transitions, and your new life doesn't fit your role as a youth leader as well as your old life did. Maybe you have mental health struggles. You're struggling with burnout, like we talked about, or anxiety or depression, and that is overwhelming your ability to function as a leader. Or maybe if you have family needs, if you use student ministry as a way to escape what's going on at home, that's a bad sign. If your family needs more time from you and you're not able to give it because you're giving that time to students, never cheat your family for the sake of the kids or the kingdom. Again, God has a deep bench. He has other people. Your family only has you. You can't be replaced in that role. You can, like it or not, be replaced pretty quickly in your youth leader role. And so you need to prioritize the family. Quitting isn't failing. Saying I need to quit isn't that you failed at youth ministry. In fact, it's wisdom. It's recognizing that you're perhaps in a time right now where you need to work on something. So if you're burned out, step back and refuel. You'll be welcome back, I'm sure. If your boundaries are slipping, then step back immediately before they fully break. If your season is changing, then leave well. Be able to communicate with Heather and with the students like, hey, my life's just a little bit different right now. It doesn't mean I feel differently about you. It's just different in what I can give. Stepping away isn't quitting, it's leading with integrity. It's one way to retain your integrity. And if you do it right, you'll leave the ministry stronger than when you found it. All right. These are all the things we just covered. I want you to pick one that felt like, oh, this is the number one thing that I want to remember from our time today? Pick one and share it with someone at your table. Go ahead. Going to give you 30 more seconds. All right. I have 2 more minutes of your time, and here's what I'd like to do with them. I'm going to give you what I hope is a helpful image for what you're doing when you spend one-on-one time with a student. We're going to say that this is a student's soul. This is their hopes, their dreams, their fears, their struggles. This is everything that we want access to as a youth leader. This is where the magic happens. This is what we're trying to get to so we can have real conversations about real things. And it would be great if they just walked in and said, "Here, you want this? Let's talk about it." But you get to page 2 of the Bible and things stop going to plan immediately. Adam and Eve sin, and what do they feel immediately? Shame. They get scared. They hide. They run away. They build walls. And so that's what we've learned to do. And so now we guard our soul. We put up a barrier to our soul. And it would be kind of invasive if with someone came, we said, "Hey, can I have that? Give me that, right?" So here's what we do. Every time we spend time with students, every time you're sitting on the bus, that time you're sitting next to them, honestly, at a retreat or during a sermon, we're pouring a little bit at a time, here and there, We start to pour in through one-on-ones. We start to pour in through that text message, that follow-up, that reminder. We continue to pour and pour and pour. And slowly, we can't tell. Usually we can only see the surface, but slowly we get to a point where suddenly that soul has surfaced. We've surfaced the soul. We're at a point where they're like, okay, you've earned the right to go ahead. I trust you to handle this. Now, it would be great if every student was the same, if every student was this shape and size, but they're not. You might have a seventh grade boy from a stable family. You remember his name, you take him to Chipotle, and he's like, here you go, I will tell you anything. Took half a bottle. It was easy. I like to think of the pouring as hours. Some kids, it's 30 minutes at Chipotle. Some kids, it might be 30 hours of hanging out, and we don't know. And you might have a student, maybe it's that new kid who's coming, you don't even know their family, but you can tell there's some hurt there. And so you go and you pour and you pour, and you're like, man, with that seventh grader, I went to Chipotle and that was enough. Well, maybe we can get them to come to snow camp or winter camp or something else. And you keep pouring and pouring and pouring. And it doesn't feel like enough. And you've poured everything you have, and there they are, still just not surfacing. My first year as a youth pastor, I had a student named, we'll call her Jane. I had a student named Jane. And this was Jane. There was 10 kids in our youth group. I was the first full-time youth pastor. It was great. I got to spend time all the time with all the kids. And me and Kathy, Jane's main youth leader, spent so much time pouring. And we would say to each other, don't you feel like you've poured all you have and still nothing has bubbled to the surface? What are we going to do? We kept pouring. We kept pouring. We kept pouring. On June 1st, 2007, Jane's father took his own life. And the two people who were called were me and Kathy. And we went over and we sat with her as her whole world fell apart. And if that was the day that we started to pour, we would have had some problems. But it turned out all those postcards, all those coffee dates, all those I'm glad you're here, all those how's life, hey, how'd that test go? All of those had been filling this up. And so when the time came, we only had a small gap to fill to get to a place where Jane would let us talk with her about what was going on in her life. As long as you're pouring, you're making progress. As long as you're pouring, you're making progress. You're bringing things to the surface. And the beautiful thing is you're not doing it alone. When you have these kids, you also have a room full of people who are pouring into them as well. And so as long as you're pouring, you're making progress. You're my favorite people because you love my second favorite people, which is students. And I'm grateful for the work that you do, and I'm hopeful for the pouring that you'll do in the years ahead. Can I pray for you real quick? Father God, thank you for this incredible team who gives so much of their time, of their energy, of their thought, of their life to invest and pour into the students that you have entrusted to them. Lord, selfishly, I pray that they will get to see the impact they've made, that they'll see that time where the soul is surfaced, that they get the opportunity to do some of that deep work that you invite us to do. But I pray that they will be encouraged, that we will all be encouraged that as long as we're pouring, it's worth it, and we trust you with the rest. So may you help us to pour in healthy ways into the students that you've brought across our paths so that you can do the work that you intend to do with them. I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you all.